Joining me now from Uppsala in Sweden is Rouzbeh Parsi, a Middle Eastern specialist from Lund University. Thank you very much for your time. It's hard with the constant stream of contradictory messages to get a sense of whether there is a deal on the table or not. But should we be grateful that a conflict which so easily could have spun further out of control might appear to be de-escalating?
Well, I suppose we could call it a de-escalation, but as you said yourself, the problem is that there are so many contradictory ideas about how it's going to be resolved and negotiation positions that it's very difficult to see whether this is a process or just a bidding war. And just to remind everyone, it could easily slip back into a full-scale war because both parties seem to also think at the same time that a new war would actually strengthen their negotiation position if they were afterwards to go back to the table again.
Is it right to say, though, that it appears, and appearances are everything in the Middle East, that the Iranians now have the upper hand in these talks?
Well, yes and no. I think it's clear for most people that Iran came out of this war stronger than anyone anticipated, and the United States came out weaker. That's also partly because the Americans had much higher ambitions in terms of what they were supposed to achieve through this war, and that varied over time, while the Iranians basically wanted to make sure they were still standing afterwards. And what they have shown now is that they can control effectively the Straits of Hormuz without any nuclear weapons and so on. So in that sense, Iranians are stronger. But that doesn't mean that they can go on with this in some kind of never-ending story, because the Iranian economy and the Iranian society has suffered a lot through the bombardment of this war.
But it's clear that both sides are looking for an off-ramp, aren't they?
Yes, but again, with the caveat that we hear one thing from Rubio, another thing from Trump, and a third thing potentially from Hegseth. And then you have the negotiators, Witkoff and Kushner, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the American position is a bit all over the place at the same time, which makes it difficult to see which one of these is the position and which is what is noise and what is supposed to be decoys, as it were, within the media landscape.
So where is this going to leave Iran's nuclear program?
Well, the Iranian nuclear program needs to be negotiated. That is, that's inevitable. The problem with what they're doing now on both sides is that since they have absolutely no trust in each other, and they have great difficulty formulating a process through which trust could be built, they're going from one ceasefire to the next, as it were, rather than deciding on valid kind of checkpoints where you can see that each side have done what they should do, which is what happened during the nuclear agreement that came about in 2015. Now, the nuclear issue itself technically isn't difficult to solve. Again, it's more about the political trust and when that agreement will come to an end.
But we had a situation, didn't we, in 2015 with the Obama administration having reached an agreement that has long since been kicked to the sidewalk, effectively. But in terms of what do you think the Americans would be happy with, keeping in mind that this war does appear to be hurting Trump, and certainly we're seeing that in polls which are showing that, there's a growing number of Americans who do not support this conflict.
Well, the Republican Party cannot afford this. They couldn't afford it to begin with. Trump may think that he can kind of dissect himself from the party and go on with it for reasons of pride. I think the Americans will probably reach the same conclusion that the Obama administration did, which is that they cannot force Iran to give up enrichment in full. They can at best get a moratorium that kind of pushes it down the line in terms of when the Iranians would again resume it, but they cannot get to zero enrichment. The Obama administration could not do that through sanctions. The Trump administration couldn't do it through sanctions nor war. And then, you either accept that or you continue to live in la la land and claim that another war will solve it.
In your opinion, what would be the best outcome from both sides?
The best outcome would be that Iran goes back to a slightly stricter version of the agreement from 2015, so everyone can be clear and safe in that the program is not going to go in a nuclear weapon direction. And for them then in return, they want the lifting of all American sanctions, not just a suspension, because that would then allow them to resuscitate the economy, which is what society direly needs. And then, of course, the Straits is the next issue. But I think that is, in a sense, much more solvable because it's very unrealistic that the Iranians are going to be able to control these straits, considering that all their neighbors also need it, and they're not going to subject themselves to Iranian control.
Rouzbeh Parsi there from Lund University, thank you so much.